Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So I've been asked this question over and over again to the point where I'm going to answer it on camera. The question is, at present time, do you consider the Pokemon marketplace to be in a speculative bubble? The answer is absolutely yes. In my opinion, the market for Pokemon products, collectibles, vintage cards, graded, ungraded, factory sealed booster boxes, that whole market is under the guise of a massive speculative bubble. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, guys. I know when I talk about speculative markets, I did a video several months back about the different phases and stages of a speculative bubble and how they end. Well, there are a lot of established collecting categories that go through speculative bubbles. Back in the 1980s, we saw it with graded coins. When coin grading came to the market, for about 10 years there, that market was under the guise of a massive speculative bubble. Wall Street was manipulating that market at that particular time. Today, you have a lot of people that are going after a lot of these more esoteric, non-established collecting categories like graded video games, vintage video games, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon cards, and they're finding it very easy to manipulate these markets. And that's what I think is happening in the market for Pokemon collectibles at present time. That doesn't mean that all those prices are going to eventually collapse. What it means is when that market eventually stabilizes and becomes an established collecting category, there's going to be a transition and a stabilization of a lot of those prices. And at that point, some of those prices are going to drop. Some of them are going to go up in value. So if you are getting involved in the Pokemon marketplace, if you're getting involved in the graded video game marketplace, if you're getting involved in the market for factory sealed vintage Magic the Gathering booster boxes or high-end reserve list graded cards, whether they're graded by PSA or BGS, those markets eventually there's going to be a price transition or a price equilibrium that's going to occur in those collecting categories as soon as they become established markets in the antiques and collectibles trade. If you don't believe me, again, not only did it happen with graded coins, it also happened with comic books. You know, people don't seem to realize that comic books were not really seen as collectible until really the late 1960s. That's when the market took hold. In fact, in 1970, when the first edition of the Overstreet Comic Price Guide was published, that's when people started to notice the market for comic books at that particular time. That's why I caution a lot of people from paying ridiculous prices for some of these Bronze Age comic books and even Copper Age comic books that were published in 1975, 1976, 1983, 1985, because hoarding of these books was commonplace. Back in 1975, when Giant Size X-Men 1 came out, when Amazing Spider-Man 129 was published in 1974, there were people that were buying up near mint comic books right off the newsstands and holding them for when they would become worth money. Now, that's not to say that your copy of Amazing Spider-Man 129 or Incredible Hulk 181 or X-Men 94 or Giant Size X-Men 1 are going to become worthless over the next few years. But what it means is you must be cognizant to realize that there's a lot of those books circulating out there. So some of the prices that they've achieved over the years are not going to be sustainable for the long term. We're already seeing price resistance occurring on key books like Amazing Fantasy 15 that gave way to the first appearance of Spider-Man. So if price resistance is occurring on a book like that, do you really think a book that was hoarded in near mint condition from 1974 that features the first appearance of the Punisher or Wolverine is going to hold value over the long term? Don't get me wrong, they're key comic books. They will always be valuable. But when the market for graded comic books starts to lessen and people start to cash out of that market, those particular items are going to drop a little bit in value. Whether that happens 5 years from now, a year from now, or 10 years from now is anybody's guess. But you must understand that when a market starts to stabilize, prices both fall and they increase concurrently. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of people that are invested in vintage comic books, and I'm using this because I think this is a great example when we compare that market to Pokemon or Magic the Gathering or even vintage toys or even graded video games. The market for vintage comic books is established, but at the same time, it is going through a massive speculative bubble just due to the fact that CGC came around at the right time. And then on top of that, you had the Marvel Cinematic Universe boom that caused a lot of people to want to go after vintage comic books in high grade because they saw them as good long-term investments. Well, eventually, again, that market's going to lessen. There's already people that are cashing out their CGC comic book collections and they're going after graded video games, or they're going after Pokemon cards, or they're going after, to a lesser extent, graded Magic the Gathering cards. So those markets are cannibalizing each other. Well, when it comes to Pokemon, you must realize that there are people operating in that market who know how to manipulate that market. And there's a lot of the same people that were manipulating the Magic the Gathering market back in 2016, back in 2017, when Rudy with Alpha Investments came on the scene and people were investing in Bitcoin. And when they cashed out their Bitcoin, they needed a new place to park their money. They chose Magic the Gathering. Well, obviously, Magic the Gathering over the last few years suffered substantial losses, especially in vintage reserve list cards. Well, that money had to go somewhere. A lot of that money went into graded video games. A lot of it went in the stock market. A lot of it went into Pokemon. And it's the same people who know how to manipulate these markets that are operating in a lot of these pop culture-based collectibles because the barrier to entry is very low. If these same people tried to do that in the traditional antique marketplace or the marketplace for coins and currency, the marketplaces for those items are very, very sophisticated. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies that make those markets dangerous for short-term money and or market manipulation. As a result, a lot of people are not going into the graded coin marketplace, parking $5,000 to $10,000 and trying to get their money back out 3 to 6 months later. If they're doing that, they are a dealer with decades of experience on their hands. Again, guys, what makes investing in pop culture-based collectibles inherently risky is the fact that the barrier to entry is extremely low. Anybody out there with a credit card can go into any of these markets with ease, exit them with ease, and if they know what they're doing, they can manipulate these markets very easily. I've done it in the past. I've done videos on this. If you go back through this channel, I talk about the Atari speculative boom, or when eBay came on the scene back in 1995, all the way up to 2005, the market for Atari 2600, ColecoVision, Intellivision, pre-Nintendo video game systems and computers was on fire. I literally made, just in that 10-year span, hundreds of thousands of dollars that I put in mutual funds, stocks, bonds. That's where pretty much I got all my money to this day, was pretty much selling and flipping Atari 2600, ColecoVision, and Intellivision games on the market back between the years of 1995 and 2005. I did very well. That market, I don't think will ever, or I should say that period of time will ever be repeated again in the antiques and collectibles trade. Because when eBay premiered, it ushered in a gold rush of a lot of money and a lot of collecting categories that were soaring in value. Well, if you had any knowledge of the antiques and collectibles trade at that particular time, you knew that a lot of those markets would eventually go belly up, just simply because there were too many people coming into those markets, manipulating them. And also, you had a lot of starry-eyed speculators thinking that those markets would be good long-term investments. They were not good long-term investments overall. Now, that doesn't mean that Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and graded video games are going to go that route. I will caution you, though, and state that until those markets do become established, you're going to have one bumpy ride where a lot of speculators and market manipulators are going to come in. Some are going to make money. Some are going to lose money. But when you guys come to me and you ask for my advice on like a box of Sky Ridge from Pokemon, and you ask me, hey, Sean, this particular factory seal booster box went from $8,000 all the way up to $16,000 in a matter of 6 months. What's your opinion on the market? Well, if I see that happening in any market, I'm going to tell you it's speculative at best. A price is not stable at that point. No price should double in value in less than 6 months, especially when the item in question is already selling for thousands of dollars. I don't know what the equilibrium price of that particular product should be at present time. And that's the problem that I have with a lot of these markets. You know, when I look at the market for high-end artwork, when I look at the market for traditional antiques, when I look at the market for coins and currency, I'm pretty good at assessing what the equilibrium price of those particular items should be. So for instance, if I look at a coin and a coin in that particular condition, grade, and type is selling for on average $3,000, and I'm looking at an auction and that particular coin in that auction sells for $3,500, I'm okay with that. It's still within range. Now, if I'm looking at that coin and that coin that normally sells for $3,000 sells for $2,500, I'm okay with that. It's still within range. However, if that $3,000 coin sells for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, I'm beginning to wonder, why is that particular coin selling for $6,000 when other coins of that same type, variety, and eye appeal, because remember, you can have two coins in the same grade, same condition, same mint mark that sell for two entirely different sums because one may have toning or one may lack toning and the eye appeal is completely different. So when I'm comparing coins, I'm not only comparing the grade, the mint mark, and the type, I'm also looking at the eye appeal of the coin. So if I see two coins that are equal, the same eye appeal and all, and one sells for $3,000 and one sells for $6,000 all of a sudden, it makes me wonder, is that market being manipulated? Is that item starting an upward trend where people are starting to realize that maybe this coin is quote unquote scarce or rare on the market? Or on the other side of the spectrum, is somebody out there who doesn't know what they're doing bidding up that coin to that particular price point? Now, what I like about established markets, when we look at traditional antiques, artwork, historical documents, coins, currency, most of the people that are playing in that pool know what they're doing. Or when we look at a lot of pop culture-based collecting categories or speculative markets, everybody can get into those markets with ease. There's a lot of Timmies, there's a lot of Poindexters, there's a lot of speculators operating in those markets, and to be fair, there's a lot of investors and market manipulators also operating in the high-end pool of those markets. So that's why when I see like a booster box of Pokemon cards go from $8,000 to $16,000 in 3 to 6 months, I analyze the market and I go, okay, something's up with this particular market at present time. Prices should not exponentially increase that quickly. That's why you have a lot of these unsophisticated speculators coming into these markets and they're buying up these items thinking that they can flip them over the next 3 to 6 months and double their money. And sometimes that works in some of these pop culture collecting categories. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes, in the case of the person that sold the infamous, I think it was an unlimited Black Lotus, who paid something like $20-some thousand for the card, flipped it on eBay, and he only got $11,000 for it when he went to resell it. Some of these people also learned their lesson the hard way. So what I'm going to say to you guys is, it's not that the Pokemon marketplace is ever going to crash. It's that, are the prices being paid for these items at present time sustainable for the long term? In my opinion, the answer is no for 90 to 95% of all the items on the market right now. That being said, if you're one of these people that are investing in the top 1, 3, 5% of the Pokemon market, or you're going after Pokemon Illustrator cards in PSA 9, PSA 8 condition, or you're going after factory seal booster boxes of the original first edition base set, yeah, those items, I think, are more stable than a lot of your speculative bets in this particular market. So I hope that answers your question. That too can apply to graded video games, and it can also apply to Magic the Gathering. I will be doing more videos on that in the future. I just in this video wanted to speak to Pokemon and the related collectibles market because a lot of people have reached out to me and asked me to comment on the graded and Pokemon vintage market at present time. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.